The Arizona Territory, baked under a relentless sun, its desert winds carrying dust and memories of war. Tala moved like a shadow between the rocks, her moccasins silent against the sand. Every breath she took was heavy with her brother's name. The sound of gunfire still haunted her dreams. The white men had called it justice. Her people called it murder. For months, she had tracked the man they said fired the last shot. Now, as she followed the faint trail of blood down to the river, she could feel her heartbeat matching the rhythm of vengeance. She found him near the water's edge, sprawled among the reeds, his horse gone and his rifle broken beside him. The cowboy's chest rose shallow, his face pale beneath the dust. Cole Ryder. She knew the name, whispered among soldiers and settlers alike. A killer, a ranch hand turned gun for hire. She raised her rifle, finger resting on the trigger, ready to balance the scales. Yet something in the stillness made her pause. He didn't reach for a weapon or plead for life. He simply turned his head and met her eyes. His voice was rough, soaked in pain. "Do it," he said, the words falling soft like ash. "Maybe I deserve it." The sentence broke something inside her. She'd imagined this moment 100 times, his fear, his begging, the sweet rush of justice. But instead she found no fight in him, no hatred, only exhaustion. Tala felt the desert around them quiet, the wind dying as if it too were listening. Her hand trembled. She could pull the trigger and walk away, but for the first time, vengeance didn't taste like freedom. She lowered the gun, unsure why. Maybe it was the blood soaking his side, or the way the river shimmered red in the light. Maybe it was the ghost of her brother whispering in her heart that killing another broken soul would not bring peace. Tala knelt beside him, pressing a cloth against his wound. His eyes widened, confusion mixing with pain. "Why?" he asked, half-conscious. She didn't answer. Words were useless in the desert. She worked silently, washing away the blood, her breath steady even as her heart battled itself inside her chest. Night fell cold and silver. A fire flickered between them, painting their faces in gold and shadow. Cole drifted in and out of fever, muttering names she didn't know. She watched him, torn between duty and something she couldn't name. In the flicker of flame, he didn't look like the enemy anymore, just a man caught in the same war that had taken too much from both sides. When he finally slept, she stood over him, rifle in hand once more. Her people would never forgive her for what she was doing. But mercy, once given, can't be taken back. At dawn, he woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of water. His wound was bound, and Tala was sitting nearby, sharpening her knife. He stared, unsure whether to thank her or fear her. "You should have left me," he rasped. She met his gaze, her eyes like storm clouds. "You don't get to tell me what I should do," she said. The hint of a smile crossed his lips. "Guess I don't." The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was heavy with unspoken truths, of blood, of loss, of two lives tangled by something neither understood. Days passed as he regained his strength. She hunted rabbits and gathered roots, still keeping distance between them. He tried to speak, to explain, but each time the words faltered. Finally, one evening as the sun bled across the desert sky, he said, "I didn't shoot your brother. I tried to stop them." The confession struck her harder than any bullet. She wanted to call him a liar, to silence the ache his voice stirred, but she saw no deceit in his eyes, only regret. The rifle in her lap felt heavier than ever before. When she turned away, he thought she might leave him there to die. Instead, she whispered, "You still wear the dust of those who did." Her tone wasn't cruel, it was sorrowful. He nodded, understanding that forgiveness wasn't something he could ask for, only earn. They sat in silence as the stars rose above, the desert night cooling around them. In that quiet, something fragile began to grow. Not trust, not yet, but the first fragile root of understanding. By the week's end, his wounds had closed, and he could stand again. He saddled a half-broken horse he'd caught near the ridge, glancing back at her one last time. "I'll carry what I did," he said, voice low. "But I'll remember you saved me." She didn't answer. She simply watched him ride away, the wind tugging at her braids. As his figure disappeared into the horizon, Tala felt the old fire in her chest shift into something new. Not love yet, but the beginning of something far deeper. The blood debt had ended. What came next belonged to the heart. The desert had a way of keeping secrets. Each sunrise stretched over miles of untouched silence, hiding what it chose to keep. Tala and Cole lived within that silence now, two souls bound by chance or fate or something older than either could name. She hid him deep among the sandstone cliffs, where the wind sang through narrow canyons and no hoofprints lingered long in the dust. His wounds healed slowly, but not as slowly as the distance between them. At night she watched the firelight paint his face, tracing the lines of a man who had once been her enemy, and now was something she could not bring herself to name. Cole learned her rhythms, the way she moved without sound, the way she spoke with her eyes more than words. He had never met a woman who carried silence like a weapon. Sometimes she'd laugh at his clumsy attempts to gather roots, or at how he cursed when a snake startled him. Each laugh felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He told her about the ranch, about the war that had burned through his life, and the guilt that still followed him. She told him about her brother, his courage, his songs, the day he never came back. For the first time, they saw the world through each other's scars. The nights were long, filled with the hum of crickets and the low crackle of the fire. Cole showed her the stars, how men of the plains read them like maps, how the North Star never moved. She listened quietly, then pointed to a cluster near the horizon. "We call that the eye of the coyote," she said softly. "It watches to see who carries truth," he smiled. "Then I hope it sees me honest tonight." She didn't smile back, only reached across the fire, placing her hand over his. The desert was cold, but her touch carried the warmth of forgiveness. As weeks passed, the desert seemed to change with them. The harsh winds softened, and the nights felt less empty. Cole began to walk again, strong enough to saddle his horse. Tala knew the time was near, the moment when he'd have to leave before her tribe discovered him. But a strange ache filled her chest whenever she thought of it. One evening, when the sun sank low and painted the rocks in crimson, he said, "I'll go tomorrow. You've done more than I deserve." She turned away, her voice quiet. "You owe a debt to no one. You gave me peace where I only knew anger." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the woman beneath the warrior. The next morning, her world shattered. Riders' tracks cut through the sand, fresh and heavy. Her tribe had found the camp. She woke Cole before dawn, fear twisting her words. "You must leave," she whispered. Now, but it was too late. The sound of hoofbeats echoed down the canyon, and in moments they were surrounded. Faces she'd known all her life, eyes filled with fury. The chief, old and sharp-eyed, dismounted first. "You hide the enemy," he said. "You break the vow of blood." Tala stepped forward, placing herself between Cole and the drawn spears. "He is no enemy," she said firmly. "He is a man who bleeds as we do." The air hung heavy with tension. Cole reached for his gun, but she stopped him, pressing her hand against his chest. "No more blood," she whispered. The chief raised his hand. "Then his life will cost yours." Tala's heart pounded. She looked back at Cole, the man who had once been her brother's ghost, and then at her people, her home. "If I die," she said, "then let it be for peace, not for hate." For a long moment no one moved. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Finally the chief lowered his weapon. "Then he leaves," he said, voice hard. "And you will never return." Tala nodded, eyes bright with tears she refused to shed. She turned to Cole, placing the carved feather from her necklace into his hand. "The desert will remember," she said softly. He tried to speak, but words failed him. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, feeling the tremor of her breath. "I'll come back," he said. "Someday." She shook her head, a sad smile touching her lips. "The spirits have already taken what was meant for us. Go, before they change their mind." He mounted his horse, the morning sun cutting gold through the canyon, and rode away without looking back. Years passed, but the desert did not forget. Cole became a rancher again, his hands scarred, his heart still haunted. Every sunset over the red mesas reminded him of her. He never married, never found peace in towns or saloons. Some nights he'd ride to the old canyon, listening to the wind that carried her name. One evening, under the same stars they once counted together, he found a feather wedged between two stones, the same one she had given him long ago. He smiled, eyes wet, and whispered into the quiet, "You kept your promise, Tala." And somewhere beyond the horizon, the wind carried a faint echo, a woman's laughter, soft as the desert rain. In the heart of the Wild West, where vengeance was once the only law, love had carved its own legend. It was not a tale of victory or defeat, but of two souls who met in the dust and chose mercy instead of blood. The world would forget their names, but the land, the ancient endless land, would remember.